Welcome to the channel, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. This is gonna be a fun episode. I'm co-hosting this episode with Master Vincent Mei today, and we have also Viet with us in the room, and we're gonna discuss a very interesting topic that came up from Vincent Mei, and it's the fact that Viet it's, in my opinion, an extraordinary martial artist, but he's obviously from the Wutan lineage, but he's built so much knowledge in martial arts from different art, which is strange, especially in our lineage, right? And we're gonna discuss with him how all those martial arts that he has learned over the past year, what has it done for him? Okay, so it's gonna stick around because this is gonna be fun. So hi, Vincent, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you again for inviting me and accepting my topic for this podcast. And I think it should be fun because and then we're co-hosting and it's something new. And I think we can combine our viewerships together and also Viet's and on this pretty interesting topic.
Absolutely, Viet. Thank you for being here with us, and we're very excited to start shooting questions to you and try to um, move things around here. How are you today? You
I'm
ready?
doing well. Yeah, I think it is I think a lot of people who know me, at least based on my internet presence, often have questions about, where did I learn all of this? Why did I do this? So it's good to have sort of an honest conversation about sort of my efforts and my endeavors. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm very willing to share why I did what I did.
Okay. Okay. So Vincent, go ahead.
Yeah,
Start.
yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, that's great. And I think most of you guys in the audience who are listening to this, I think you guys know Viet. Viet is a very popular kung fu influencer online,
I like
and
that term.
yeah, I mean, I think what's really unique about Viet from my side of the knowledge that we're both under the Wutan lineage. Actually, all three of us are. Wutan itself has, we have preserved quite a few styles already. We have Baji Pigua, Bagua, Chen Tai Chi, and Mi Zhong, and Xing Yi even, and San Tong Bei. So that's already a lot of styles within the Grandmaster Liu lineage, and Wutan try to preserve more. But Viet, from those of you who follows him, like Viet has like possessed with a lot of different styles. He's before he has a baby, he basically travels around and follow teachers. That's it's like living the life that we all dream to live in, and following different teachers, learning different techniques, different styles. So why don't we first question, how many of these various different styles or systems that you have experience or trained in?
Since you posed that question yesterday, I went into my hard drive, and I have, I'm a little neurotic, so I've organized everything according to folders, and um, in terms of styles that I have experienced, I counted 26.
Oh wow.
But that doesn't include sub styles. Like for example, um, if you take Tibetan martial arts or Tibetan Chinese martial arts, broadly it can be divided into um, what we call Tibetan white crane.
Hmm.
So in Cantonese, it's called Pai,
Hmm.
and then you have Hapgakyun, right? Xiajiaquan, which is like knight family boxing,
Yeah.
and then you have Lama, right? So I don't count those subsets because I feel that they're under one broad style. Just like Southern Mantis, for example. I started Southern Mantis with Philip Lay doing Juklum, and then afterwards I continued to seek out other other teachers, which led me to have some experience in like 居家螳螂, right? 周家螳螂. So roughly 26.
Wow. So it's at least 26,
At
basically.
least 26.
Right. Because a lot of these substyles, obviously, they became substyles. They each have their own like characteristics. Just from what I know, that the so-called the southern mantis already have various different. They may look the same, but once you get into it, they have their own distinct flavor.
Yeah, you have people who are groupers and who are splitters, right? So I don't believe that in history, a lot of people were pure practitioners, right? I think that there was a lot of interaction, whether it be through friendly interactions, right? Especially starting in the late 1800s, going into the Republican period, there was a lot of uh, martial arts coming in together to form societies, right? So like Li Cunyi had his 武术会, right? You had 精武门, you had the Nanxing 国术馆. There's all these efforts to have people come together and exchange, right? And so people weren't very pure, and anytime people came together, whether it was friendly or through just hands touching, you obviously have exchange information, right? The secret is in the hands, right? And so when you take styles, for example, like Southern Mantis, right? You can talk about how these styles are now styles, right? But I'm sure that somewhere in history, right, somebody who practiced Zhiguang Tang, Zhulian Tang, would have interacted with somebody who practiced Zhujia Tang, right?
Yes.
Because they're in the same general area, they spoke a similar dialect, Hakka, right? Kejia. So the notion of styles is more of a modern issue, right? Right. So say like, for example, like Tai Chi, right? Back previously, even as late as the 20s and 30s, people just I practice Tai Chi Chuan, right? And now we say, oh, Chen Shi Tai Chi Chuan. Oh no, what kind of Chen do you practice? Do you practice Chen style from Taiwan, right? And even then, you can split it further. Oh, are you Wutan or all these other people? Oh, do you practice Chen Village or do you practice Chen Fa Ke, right? Do you practice Hong Tai, right? Chen Shi Tai Chuan, right? So I think these days we've started to split things
even more,
technology. But historically, we just group things.
Viet, and out of those 26 styles, right? There are too many to probably mention all of them right now, but which one do you consider the most important ones that you have learned? If you can mention them, because
for me personally, when anybody asks me, because I always, when people ask me like what style of kung fu I do, I know they're looking for one or at most two, right? They don't. Anybody who says they do more than two, they start to doubt whether this person is really is this person going broad or going deep, right? So I usually tell people I'm more of a Northern Shaolin and Baji person, a Baji practitioner, right?
okay.
Anybody who knows me a little bit more will obviously catch the fact that I have done other stuff, but those are the things that I tell people. Why do I mention that? I think because Northern Shaolin was my core. Even before I met my current Shufu that I discipled, Jason. So I had practiced Northern Shaolin before that, and even after him, I did seek out other lineages to kind of broaden my knowledge of Northern Shaolin. And I should probably be referring to this more as long fist, Changqua, right? Because when I say Northern Shaolin, people nowadays assume that, oh, you practice like the stuff that's coming from Songshan Shaolin, right? The Shaolin temple stuff. The specific area that I was focusing on was more people from Shandong who came to Taiwan and taught their long fist, right? And the name Shaolin actually comes after because they're trying to probably identify with something greater, right?
Yeah, it's more a region,
right. But to be frank, the links to Shaolin pretty tenuous. So more accurately, long fist, right? And I also say Baji and Piwa because I feel that, when I first discipled with my teacher, he gave me a choice of, do you want to start with Baji, Piwa, or do you want to start with Bagua, right? Which, when I've talked to other Wutan people, that was a very
That doesn't
odd
happen.
choice. It doesn't happen, right? You told me that learning Baji, it had to be dark,
Oh
all the
yeah.
windows had to be nighttime, only certain people were invited. Uh, I don't know what stroke of luck I came across, but my Shifu, and it wasn't just me, but really anybody coming to see him from the very beginning, you had a choice between which class you wanted to commit. And we didn't have the other systems. Like, I didn't have to start off with Mantis, right? I didn't have to start off um, Long Fist, right?
Yeah.
I went into Baji, just like all my other Kung Fu brothers went to Baji,
Hmm.
right? So those are the two core that I usually tell people of.
Yeah, I think we a lot of people. I mean, there's like we all grew up reading these Chinese martial art fiction or novels, and there are always these unique characters who are possessed with so many different styles or just gifted to be able to just at a glance at someone performing and being able to like adapt and learn everything and starting to use it. So there are these like unique characters, like these Chinese novels are kind of like our versions of Marvel comics, right? And there are unique characters that has that ability, and you are you are that kind of a mutant ability that can do that. And I think not just that. I mean, sometimes there's a phrase called form collector, right? Like who's he's a form collector, but Viet to me is unique because um, I've been following him for quite a few years now, and from the initial, I'm just going to be honest, like from the initial, it's this guy is a form collector, and then over the years, I actually see, I noticed there are changes within his performance. There all these styles are kind of coming together, and which are we always also say that Chinese martial art is also the original MMA, and a lot of masters, grandmasters, very rarely you have a master or grandmaster to only possess with one style. And I think in Viet's performance over the years, starting to see a lot of the synergies from various different experiences and training. So that's why that's what sparks me to have this podcast title. And and then my next, which leads to my next question, is that when you have like, can you tell us a little bit about the commonality? You have all these like knowledge of various different styles. Some of them are drastically different. Some of them are similar. They have commonalities. What are some of the, just straight out of your head, what are some of the styles or systems that matches better with each other, and some styles that's like kind of like, oh, these two styles doesn't go together?
Sure. Um, you know, you, all of a sudden these categorizations come into my head, right? So you have like the north versus southern divide, internal versus external. You have you can even talk about like Faji, right? Like what is their emphasis? Is it more like a song, right? Like a
Yeah.
relaxing, or is it more of a tense, right? Tension, right? Um, and mind you, most styles are not one or the other, right? So there is really no style that's truly internal or external. There's usually gradients, and depends on the person's practice, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but we can see, like, there are certain styles that definitely are cousins of one another and meld better with each other, right? Um, so, for example, I think like Baji and Xinichuan,
Mm.
right, have some commonalities with each other, right? And I think of it almost as an evolution. Probably things start off with like a Changquan long fist first, and then people may have gone into Baji and then Xingyi Chuan, right? Xingyi to me, and I don't I whatever mistakes or whatever comments I make, I'll take the fall for it. But to me, like, I can do Xingyi all day long, right? Personally, right? Different ways of practicing. But for me, Baji, I can do at most 2 hours. I'm exhausted after 2 hours, right? So I feel like Xingyi is a refined Baji to me, right? Looking at Southern styles, if you look at things like, you know, Cai Li Fo, Cai Lei Fan, right? Versus Tibetan White Crane, Lama. You can see some similarities. Some of the hands are very similar, right? Um, Wing Chun and Southern Mantis also go very well with each other, right? Um, so you have to look at, I think, the like at the theme, right? Is it going for more short arm versus long arm, tension versus relaxed, um, and sometimes even the terms are the same, right?
Yeah.
And that makes it easier to pick up something else when you have that common vocab, right? Um, so yeah, there are certainly different styles. So those are like the broadly when I'm looking at something. And now that I have this kind of base knowledge, if I ever do want to learn something, and I personally I've put things to a stop. I don't learn anything new as quickly as I did before. I'm not as curious, which is not a it's not a good or a bad thing. I just number one because I have a kid, I don't have the time. And number two, I feel like I got so much stuff to look at and review in my head. Now that I have this newborn, I put her on my chest, and when I can't sleep at 4 in the morning, I start going through my forms. I start going, hey, what is that about? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Those videos that I've made are the result of periods where I've had like this clarity of mind, right? And I'm like, look, I feel like I can do that better. I feel like I can break it down better. I feel like I can present it in a different way, right? So
How many
long
forms do
short.
you know? Yeah.
That's a pretty that I didn't count.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, but I had to ask.
I think that's in the hundreds. I think.
gotta be I don't know how many videos I've made the last 5 years. I know that I since having the GoPro, right,
Mm-hmm.
and setting up the tripod, I have been filming for the last 5 years, and I've probably shot over, I think, 200 to 300
Yeah,
videos,
that's what I guess.
right? How many forms can I mean? A better question might be, well, how many forms can you do right on the spot? Probably 100. How many forms do I feel like I do well? Probably and with like where I say like, hey, if I went to competition, I'm ready to go, right?
Yeah.
I'd say about maybe 10, 15, right? So it just gets less and less and less, right?
It's pretty
And
impressive.
something that you observed, how my performance of these forms or these techniques have changed over the years. Um, Ultimately, I have only 2 arms and 2 legs, and the same head, same brain is going through all of those videos. There's only so many ways you can move the body. So I am no longer pure, right? I remember when I first started Hung Ga, like the first comment my teacher said, "Hey, how come you just run through your forms? You never stop, right?" During the tiger section of Fu singing, right? Tiger crane, you're supposed to, when you do the tiger, you show these attributes, crane, these attributes. How can you just run through like a Northern Shaolin form? Well, Northern Shaolin is now in my bones,
Right.
and I think that has certainly influence on everything that I do, So um, I can only move in so many ways. Right?
I want to go back to something that Vincent mentioned, but we didn't go deep on it. Um, he said the term form collector, right? And I grew up in Venezuela knowing that a person that wanted to learn too many forms instead of, understanding each one of them at a time, right, was something bad. Um, did you have this thought on your mind before you started learning and recording all these forms? Did you think at a time that that was something that was bad, or you never grew up with that thought in mind per se?
I mean, I was told a lot of things while training, right? And I'll tell you, the reason why I have all that material is because I've broken a lot of rules, right? Traditionally, in Kung Fu, yes, you're supposed to commit to one core style, right?
Mm-hmm.
One teacher. You never ask to learn anything. You learn when he or she is ready to teach you. You never ask, right? Um, in terms of paying for material, I know I have lots of money to learn stuff. But when I look back at it, right, and I have noticed the stuff that I paid for, I don't really train as much. I just did it to satisfy curiosity. And the stuff that I had time with the person, right, um, that's the stuff that I practice. But kung fu for me is a little emotional when I practice. I think about that person who took the time to teach me. I think about the time that I spent with that person. I even think about times outside of kung fu, right? Times that I had lunch with that teacher, had a conversation, and things that when I had a falling out with somebody, I don't practice as much because it hurts, right?
Right.
Emotionally, physically. So some things have just fallen out of my practice, right? But I think a quick answer to your question is ultimately, why do we train, right? And I've tried to kind of ask myself because quite honestly, like I am a self-avowed forms collector. I love forms, right? I love how they look. I love how I feel after I practice them. I love how when I can take it apart and train it with somebody, it's fellowship, right? And I trained it and I learned everything simply because it made me happy, right?
Yeah.
No other reason, right? I try to find some higher purpose and say, look, I want to be an invincible fighter. To be honest, I've mainly sparred. I haven't really fought for my life, right? The way that some people have, right? In harsher settings, right? I grew up with a golden spoon in my mouth. All I've had to do was study. The first job I had ever was becoming a doctor, right? So this has been just a pastime, right? And I've always treated it as a pastime. And so when people ask me like, oh, according to this, that my teacher said, being first collector is bad. Honestly, it made me happy, and that's why I did it, right? The reason why I made all those recordings and put it out there was to share, right? I had gotten so much from other people. I don't think there is any secrets anymore. There shouldn't be, right? And I always like when some of my videos have some level of discussion, right? And constructive discussion, not like a lot of throwing mud at somebody, whatever. At the end of the day, it is just a form, right? People want to put these forms on another level instead of their divine inspiration or super secret technique or you're not ready. There's no such thing. After all of this, hundreds of forms later, 26,000 later, I can tell you that there is no secret. That something, if anybody asked me something that I knew, I could show it to them. And it doesn't mean that they have my kung fu, right? It doesn't mean that they'll be able to replicate it, right? And all my videos are out there for everybody to see and comment. I don't hold back, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that this past 2 minutes of what you just said. There's a lot of truth to it, and I think that I think everyone in the world of traditional Chinese martial art can see that we're on a decline and things are getting lost. And that's when we have certain individuals like yourself or including Jorge and also a lot of the elders in Taiwan, they started to record. And you can see a lot of the grandmaster from the previous generation, who unfortunately passed away. Some of them didn't really record much, and that these certain individuals have possessed with a lot of knowledge, and they were lost.
It's gone.
And
Yes.
it's a pity, and they may have taught someone, they may not have taught someone, but then it's one person or two person or so what 10 person who has learned it, and these people are busy with their work and their lives, and who may have or may not have continued to teach what they learn. And I think that's why this whole art is on a decline, and I think that is a very important thing. And like for example, like Viet, when you recorded all these styles, and it's an encyclopedia in your head. It's an encyclopedia. There are a lot of people who are so-called form collectors, but you have a base, you have a core style. You were trained traditionally, so the way maybe you translate a certain style or certain forms with your own style, but it is true to traditional martial arts execution, right? So you're not jumping around or flying around. You have a base, you have the mechanics. So I think that itself is already a very good, documentation of in this entire world of traditional martial art, and I applaud you to that. And yeah, I started out with recording, trying to remind myself with all these forms that I learned. The total forms that I've learned was maybe 46 or 49, and I don't have the same power of brain power as you, so I try to record myself and try to document everything. And which pissed off a lot of people, and even my own kung fu brothers and my own teacher, who was quite a conservative as well. And I know that if he's still alive, he probably wouldn't be happy if I to certain forms that I show to the public. But I think now, after 10 years, 20 years after I recorded some of those forms, I feel like it was a good thing that I did those. And yeah, some of these one I couldn't do anymore, and yeah, and I'm not gonna get you know
I was gonna say that um, that about form collector, right? Typically, form collectors, and they start just copying, trying to copy, and then performing something. But at the end of the day, they don't do anything right. Now, Viet is a unique case because, like you were mentioning, he has a very strong core, right, with long fist and pachi and piqua, right, and then he has this structure. So, and he can copy, or like when he perform a different style, you can see that it's well executed, even if you don't know the style very well, right? But that doesn't happen typically with form collectors. When you see a real form collector, he's just trying to copy something, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have an essence. It doesn't have the structure. It doesn't have anything. It's just
yeah.
unflavored.
Yeah, you
But
would know, say 50 years later, someone trying to, whoever it is, trying to research someone who values this knowledge, and they're gonna go online or whatever form of technology they have, they're gonna find it, right? Because you have the most like this is the same guy who's doing all these forms.
yeah,
It's cool. It's super cool. It's like archaeology is like someone who dig out some like old scroll, but then in the future form, it's YouTube, and it's gonna be Viet. It's super interesting just to think about this.
I've had it's interesting, like over the years, now that I've, since going to tournaments and being able to travel and meet people in person, I'm always surprised at people who know me before I know them, right? Because it used to be, what I endeavored to do, and why do we learn kung fu for the first time? For me personally, you talk about wuxia, right? I love those stories. I love the movies, right? I remember picking up Inside Kung Fu magazine and looking at, an article from so and so teacher. And back then there was no YouTube, right? So, they would charge a lot of money for a seminar or a cassette tape, and sometimes I would buy those things, and I wouldn't be able to learn off it at all, right? But at least it satisfied a curiosity, right? Um, my when like on my last trip to Taiwan, when I went into Lion Books, uh, the person who owned the bookstore said, "Oh yeah, I know of your videos, right?"
that was
I've gone
crazy.
I've gone to a tournament once, and they were calling me like, "Oh, Sifu Lei, Sifu Lei," and I was right next to my teacher. My teacher, like at that time, had never given me any sort of official recognition. He actually told me once. I was like, "Hey, what belt am I, Sherwood?" He's like, "I've got different colors. Which one do you like?" And I picked a brown one. It was never that serious, right? And then people saying, "Sherwood, Sherwood." I was like, "Oh yeah, why are you calling me?" "Oh yeah, we watched your videos." Okay. Some people have admitted me openly that they learned a form off my video, and to me, I say, "Hey, if you took the time to watch that video and teach it yourself, it's yours."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Other countries and their martial arts have made everything public, right?
yeah,
The Japanese have made all their karate kata public, right? The Koreans have done that. It's really only Chinese martial arts that have really tried to keep it on the down low.
yeah.
and for what end, right?
Yeah.
There's always that say, why not, right? Spread Chinese martial arts, whatever. But at the rate that people are trying to do it with all those rules, it's never going to
Yeah, it's counter.
over the tide of
Yeah.
MMA, of combat sports, right?
Yeah, for real.
So
So if we no, those are great. I think if we go back to some of these questions, is that what would you say are some of the benefit? Like if you just straight out, like what are some of the benefits that having knowledge of so many different systems and styles, and what are some of the drawbacks of having to know so many different styles?
I think on a cultural level, on historical level, certainly knowing all those different styles. Because when you learn a style, you're learning about the history of the style, you're learning about the mechanics of the style, you're learning the language that they might use, and that's always a really nice way of bridging when you meet somebody of that style. And you're able to tell them, hey, I'm not saying that I'm an expert, but from what I know, you have this, this, and this that you emphasize. You have so and so core forms, so and so mother forms, so and so auxiliary forms, right? And you can instantly have a conversation, right? That's what I endeavored to do. Was that when I went to competition, I could talk to anybody about their style. They might not know what I'm doing, right?
That's very cool.
But I could walk in a room and just have conversations with pretty much anybody, right? So I really do love having that fellowship with other kung fu practitioners. I've never felt that one style was better than the other. Me versus you. We are part of a broader community of traditional Chinese martial artists, and we need to do more, in my opinion, to grow together, right, through conversation and dialogue. What are some drawbacks? I think a lot of people still have this attitude of, again, one person, one style. And sometimes, the way that I acquired material, if you didn't teach me, I found somebody that did. And that didn't always, as you can imagine, that didn't always happen. Right? That meant potentially losing a friend, potentially throwing a whole couple of years away, right, with people. What I did ultimately, looking back, was kind of selfish because I wanted to know, and that didn't always serve me well personally. I'm being honest. The other thing is that when we talk about purity of style, right, and people who only do a particular style will nitpick and say, hey, you're still making so and so mistake. I don't do everything perfectly, right?
Yeah.
I have the choreography down, but there's always the little details that I can fine tune. And you can only move your body in so many ways.
Right.
Another drawback would be, how do you maintain everything? I can't, right? This past year, since the birth of my daughter, I took a good hard look at everything that I did. And I would pick like a style, and I would make a set of basics. And I would say, hey, so I learned 10 forms from this certain teacher. Can it be reduced down to 2 or 3, right? And I found inspiration from a particular teacher that I met in Vietnam. And I, unfortunately, have not been lucky enough to study with him directly. But I remember when we had this conversation, and he told me he was a holder of a lineage. And if anybody knows about Choi Fan, Cao Li Fo, they have a lot of forms.
Yeah.
This guy only had 2 forms. And they were considered pretty simplistic. One was a training form, and one was a more technique-driven form, but all considered beginner level. And the rest of the time he spent with Sanshou, right? Lines of techniques that he would do up and down the room, 64 lines. He would do them solo, partner, and then with equipment, right? So that, like, to build gongli, right?
Yeah.
And when I asked him, hey, do you have any fancy weapons, like the 9-headed trident or wanda or Dai Pa, which is like the trident? And he's like, no. I know the short stick, and I know the chair. And I'm like, do you mean like the bench? No. He pointed. He's like, no, that folding chair. Okay. And I asked him, why did you pick such like lame weapons?
Folding chair. That's cool.
Totally. Look, after the communists came, and there was all these anti-martial art, anti-Chinese sentiment. This was in Vietnam, by the way. No one had sabers and spears and staves and swords to play with. This was the most practical thing. Those folding chairs, people,
Everywhere.
You find them everywhere. I was gonna say that.
So I know the art of the folding chair and the short stick, right? And I took some. I was like, when I looked at these systems, I realized, at most you need for a system 5 forms, right? A lot of systems will have like a mother form, right? So Wing Chun has their Xian Tao, right? Shaolin Tao. White Crane has Sanda, right? 3 battles. You could argue Baji, Xiao Baji, right? Very important. Mantis, Beng Bu, right? Bai Mei, Bak Mei. You have like Jikbao, right? There's always a mother form. And then there's some auxiliary forms, maybe 3 or 4 in number, that elucidate a certain theme. And then you have auxiliary forms, right? So, like, for example, like in Changquan, there's a Mai Fu, right? Ambush, right? Well, that form is highlighting a theme, right? There's all these
Purpose,
right?
Yeah.
Is that a core form? It can be core to some people who love that tactic, right? But it's not as important as something like Kantai, for example,
right?
Which goes a lower leg strength, right? I think people, again, most systems at most 5 forms, right? Just like if you have an essay, right? You have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Three forms, right? Adam Shu has elucidated this in some of his books, and I think it's very true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then forms you can learn, and almost this is me saying this, you can throw them away after you learn them, right? I can say this on record. After you learn Xiaohu Yan as a kid, right? Little tiger swallow. There's other forms that have more content than Xiaohu Yan. My Shifu said, you can throw that away, right? Have I thrown it away? Well, I have a video on it. But I don't practice Shaolin Yan as much.
Right.
Right. So everybody should have a core of stuff that they love, right? And they use that as a codex. I personally, because I know that people learn forms in different ways. Some teachers will teach, every technique has an application, and you don't get the next technique until you're ready. And then there are other people who will run through the choreography very quickly and then talk about the application afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not every style has a set of well-developed basics, right? I know that when I learned Northern Shaolin, we had 5 basic hand drills and then some basic kicks, right? Titui, right?
Yeah.
But the forms are never broken down the way that Baji was, where, before I learned Xiao Baji, there were 8 techniques. And then you would learn those techniques, you would do each of them 8 times, and then you would do the forms. So all the forms are liuhuan, right? Linkages, right? A lot of long fist forms, to me, were not linkages. They were just really practicing what we call jiazi, frame, right?
Yeah.
All the movements sometimes are randomly thrown together. Not every movement has a purpose, right? Some of them do. Some of them are purely for aesthetic, right? And some of them have to do with teaching you to build certain attributes, right? So, like what we talk about, this code is a T Mei Yong, right? Something is just structure, something is just for aesthetics, something is for usage, right? And have a clear idea of what those movements are. Not every teacher is going to spoon feed you every single application.
No.
My Shifu now says, he's like, since if I teach you another mantis form, you get the idea. And it's up to you to figure that out, right? Teach them how to fish, right? That person fishes for a lifetime, right? So that's the mentality that I've taken, right? I know that I learn things really fast. I probably have a better eye than most people, right, about learning choreography. Maybe there's some kind of neural connection between, my brain and my body, and I'm able to learn choreography better. But in terms of anything else, I'm just like everybody else.
Yeah.
In certain ways.
No, I am 120% agree with everything you just said, and I think I'm glad we have this conversation, and I think it is great that we get to share this. And I don't think there's a lot of discussion over this topic out there, and I think this is unique, and I'm glad we did it. And to your point, I feel like that's part of the reason why over the years I observe your transformation is that. The turning point was really this past year when you started to, distill systems into drills. And then that's when I know that, oh, Viet now is on another stage that's thinking about preserving what is important out of a system. And when you preserve these, you can create your own forms, basically. But once you have all these like important attributes or these lines, and these are basically the cores. And back in the days, these were basically representing a whole system. And then because of livelihood, they have to make money. They have to create all these materials, and that's true. And I think a lot of Southern styles, because of it's just a different era, right? So martial art teaching is actually a career, and once it's a career, when one style is having 50 forms, the other style has to follow, kind of. So they're starting to have more and more materials out.
Only in times of peace did people make forms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you talked about kung fu being something for the populace, right? So like the Jingwu Men movement, right? Or even in some ways Wutan,
Yeah.
right? Do you have the creation of curriculums, right? So like just take the history of Northern Mantis, right? Northern Mantis in the mainland versus Northern Mantis in Hong Kong versus Northern Mantis in Taiwan, you'll notice certain changes, right? I've studied a little bit of Hong Kong 7-star, but I think a lot of those forms were either made after Luo Guangyu came to Hong Kong, or they were made by his descendants, right? So I'll give you an example. So a very famous series of forms all have the word Baiyuan in front of it, right? White ape or white gibbon, right? And the original set was probably Baiyuan Toutao, right?
Yeah.
Steel's peach.
Yeah.
But then people went to town with that theme, and all of a sudden this ape is reading a book, climbing a tree, coming out of a cave, going back to the cave, wiping his ass. I don't know. And there have been people who have been descendants who have, and they've made the same probably mistake that I made, is that you have to learn hundreds of forms to know its essence, right? Jinghua. And when you chase after all of that, you realize that just read the history again and remind yourself that these were created after, right? You can distill things down to a lesser level, right? Yeah. In terms of just quantity. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Even in Taiwan, in China, different era, they have different needs. Standardized form in the 70s and now are completely different. In Taiwan, there are new styles of praying mantis being invented after it came to Taiwan. I think that's part of the beauty is like you said, is the history. Like whatever happens now is we're creating history. So in the future, they will look back and this will be part of the evolution of traditional martial
part of that evolution as well is when you start as a kid in martial arts, you have time. You have time to learn and you have time to practice 2-3 hours, right? Now, once you start growing up and you start maturing, all that information, all those forms, all those styles, and they start making sense and everything. Now, typically you get to the point where you're married, you have kids, you have family.
Hey, when you say that, smile a little, okay? When we're married.
I'm smiling.
This is
you can see it in the camera, but I'm smiling.
Be enthusiastic,
right?
We are all, on record, we are all happily married.
Yes,
right?
we are.
Happily married.
We are. We are.
Of course.
I am,
These
sweetheart.
cases of exhaustion and lack of sleep comes because we are so happy, so full of happiness.
We are. Now, going back to that, right? I don't have time to practice in a half hour, an hour session maximum that I have to practice all the forms that I know. So when I was in Taiwan, even with training with my Grandmaster Thai, he doesn't make me do all the praying mantis form that I know. We just do three form out of all the Liu Ho Tanlam Tran and Shixing Tanlam Tran, the forms that we know. So it's just a matter of being more effective with your training, right? And at the end of the day, you don't have to do all of them. And like you mentioned before, right? Some of them, maybe you don't quite like them, or you don't quite see its potential or benefit, right? And then you start filtering, right, the forms that you do.
Yeah.
So, and the styles, right? So I think I
You know,
mentioned this before, but in Taiwan you go, you do Pakwa, and then you do, from Pakwa you go to Piqua, then Praying Mantis, and then we end up with Pachi Tren. And that's how the training goes there, but we don't do all the forms, right? Pachi Tren, I remember doing all of them because they're shorter. We don't have too many forms in Pachi. But Praying Mantis, that's impossible to go like in half hour, an hour. I'm talking about here in the U.S. when we start training and practicing for ourselves, right? Like I don't have the time to do all of them. But
Yeah.
well, that's why I thought like, and it's nice that you made an observation about how like my videos have changed, especially since this year. And I'll tell you why I started that was once I had my baby, I started to know that my time is limited. I don't have. I don't know how many more videos I can make, and I don't think my wife is going to let me out of the house. So I started,
No, that's so funny because right
yeah,
before.
remember this, okay?
No, this literally, I still remember, like right before you went to Taiwan, we were talking about, we were just chatting, and then you sounded like definitely like, okay, my time is running out. So I have one last trip, and I'm gonna make it count. And then you visited like what is it, like four schools in like one day or something like that.
Right. And now everybody who talks to me, I say, well, I have a good run. I've always I talk about it in the past tense, right? Because I haven't been anywhere since my daughter's going to be close to a year pretty soon, and I haven't been anywhere, right? So I always talk about my.
So you were right.
Right. So I was but I prepared ahead of time with my.
Yes.
Think about you left Hansel and Gretel, they left breadcrumbs so they could go home, right? That's exactly what it is. All my forms are home. I'm just putting these breadcrumbs, just following the breadcrumbs back home.
And all of these happen. You're still so young, right? Because you're still very young, and I think you collected all these things, all these material first, and then you let it simmer in your body for whatever amount of time. And then by the time your baby was born, now you're extra like sort of now you're working your brain to like put them together.
Like all of a sudden, like
yes, and it's beautiful. I think that's great.
I just want to find different ways to I really hope one day I can teach more regularly, and I know that especially in this day.
Oh, you know my next question. All right, so go ahead.
Well, in this day and age, people are not. I have not. There's only a couple of friends that I know that are forms collectors like myself, right? Who love forms. I'm not bad mouthing them at all, but I'm saying who love just the practice of kung fu forms. I only know of a handful, and I know of some people who have put out their material similar to myself, and I'm in their shadow, right? Like Teddy Lai, for example, puts out a lot of material. Bichun Song from Hong Kong puts a lot of material out there. But the reason why I broke everything down into like small combinations, no more than 3 movements, was for those people who are not interested in learning forms. I can present it in a different way that still has that essence, right? And it also gave me a chance to exercise some creativity. Sometimes when you're, when I've learned forms, oftentimes I learned it because I thought I could be closer to that person, right? Oh my God, I learned Tiger Crane. I'm going to be like Huang Fei Hong, right? Oh, I learned Tai Chi. I'm going to be like Zhang Sanfeng, right? I can tell you right now, for anybody who's watching, it's an interesting thought, but it's probably not true, right? You can't be those people. Those people are history, legends, but it's nice, right? I wanted to make these combinations to facilitate teaching, hopefully in the future, transmitting these styles. And you can take those combinations and play with it 2-man, play with it with pads, right? Change up the timing with broken rhythm, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with how traditional martial arts have been passed down. People in this day of combat sports kind of will turn their back on traditional martial arts and say, hey, you know, we've been wasting our time with these things. I don't think so. I think there's a lot to be there that you know, it's just
To be unpacked, yeah.
Right. I'm just so glad that, you know, these things have been passed down, right? And these things are part of a living museum, right? We need to take those things off and dust it off and make it for the present day, right? How can we teach it better? How can we transmit it better? You know, these endeavors, for example, like having a YouTube channel, having Baji Shu, getting the word out there, right? Planting seeds for others and I'm waiting for those to sprout, right?
Yeah.
So we can grow a bigger community, right? I think, especially in this day and age, we need to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we all play a different role. I think every martial artist, we're all kind of like contributing to this community. And like last time, like we're looking for our next Shu teacher. So far, we have Hongjia. We have a great teacher in Hongjia, great teacher in Changchun. And then we're looking for our next teacher. And I thought of Viet, like who would be a better person to ask than him? He has experienced all these styles. He knows a lot of these very well-known and or not well-known enough, but possessed with really great knowledge. And yeah, and I think this is, we just have so much knowledge to share, and I think these are great.
Any final question to Viet, Vincent? Or I think we're...
I mean, he answered his last question. Last question I had is basically, what do you want to do with this unique knowledge? Because not a lot of people have this type of you know, sort of all these different knowledge, and now it's like kind of combining within you. The other person that I know is Han Jixiang, like Shifu Han Jixiang. I think he also knows hundreds of forms, and I think, and he also spends a lot of time on each one of them, and that guy has a lot of like knowledge in his head, and also physically too. And yeah, so yeah, and you answered the question that you wanted to teach, and when you teach, I'm sure it's a very unique way because you have all these experiences, and what you output is going to be different from so-called like traditional, and I think it's great. It's beautiful. I think that's part of the beauty of traditional Chinese martial art, and it should be ever evolving. And the way it evolves within you it's unique.
I thank you for those kind words. I'm still developing, right? You know, my teacher has admonished me multiple times. How many forms do you know, Viet? That's what he's told me. Like, hey, you can let these go, right? And I tell, you know, sometimes I tell him, you know, man, I spend a lot of time and money learning this stuff, and you feel like you can't let it go, right? And it does become a burden, right? I don't remember everything, and that's why I've left those videos for anybody, including myself, to review. I watch my videos to review material all the time. Like most recently, I've been on a Xingyi kick, so I've been trying to document that better.
You're glad you did it.
Once I made that video, I feel so much better. It feels cathartic. Right?
Yeah.
It left something that I can use as notes. Never mind the days of writing things and drawing things. I'm not a great artist, and I'm not a great writer, but those videos have been helpful aids for me, and I hope that I can continue to provide that to anybody who's interested. I would love to, you know, those. I wish those videos were more of a springboard towards dialogue, right?
Yeah.
It's not always constructive though. So.
It's in our generation, that's our advantage, right? Like we have this advantage of, you know, internet technology, and we're able to preserve things forever, right?
Yeah.
They're digitized, they live on a cloud. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining today. Thank you, Vincent, for this
Yeah,
topic.
thank you, Jorge, for providing the platform to make this happen. I don't have a podcast. Maybe I should start one, but this is great. Thank you. Thank you, Viet.
I really think you should get one. You should make one. And more endeavors towards spreading Wutan and spreading just ideas about Kung Fu. I would wholeheartedly support.
Absolutely.
No, I like this kind of synergy kind of play. Okay, awesome. Thank you,
All
guys.
right.
Thank you very
take
much,
care.
guys. Take care,
All
okay?
right. See you.
Bye-bye.
Subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Don't forget that.
Yes.
Thank you for watching.